The wind blew steadily across the open plains of Montana, stirring the tall, golden grass that rolled like ocean waves under the morning sun. In the distance, a small wooden cabin stood near a cluster of cottonwood trees, weathered by decades of sun and snow. It belonged to Elijah Moore, a retired forest ranger who had spent most of his life protecting wildlife and patrolling remote trails on horseback. Now in his 70s, Elijah lived alone. His wife had passed years ago, and his children were scattered across the country. He kept himself busy tending to a small garden, fixing fences, and writing in the old leather journal he always carried. But what kept his spirit alive was his quiet love for horses, creatures he believed could feel a person's soul without ever speaking a word. Every few days, he'd ride out in his truck to check the fence lines around the neighboring federal land. That's where he first saw the horse. It was early spring. The snow had melted, leaving the prairie soft and damp. Elijah was driving slowly down a dirt road when he spotted something unusual near a dry creek bed, a pale, dust-covered figure lying in the grass. He stopped the truck and stepped out, his boots sinking slightly in the mud. As he approached, he realized it was a horse, emaciated, trembling, and covered in scratches. Its mane was tangled with burrs, and its hind leg was swollen, likely from a deep gash that had turned red and angry. The horse raised its head slightly, eyes glazed with exhaustion and fear. "No brand," Elijah whispered, kneeling beside it. "No halter, no tag. Just you and your pain." He knew better than to try moving it right away. Instead, he laid his coat gently over its shivering back and opened his thermos, offering a few sips of water. The horse flinched at first but then drank, slowly, cautiously. Elijah stayed by its side until the wind grew colder and shadows stretched across the land. That evening, with the help of a neighbor and a makeshift sling, Elijah managed to transport the injured horse back to his ranch. He set up a quiet pen near the barn, lined with hay and soft blankets. He didn't name it, at least not yet. He believed a name had to be earned, not given. Days turned into weeks. Elijah cleaned the wound every morning and fed the horse by hand. The creature wouldn't let him touch its face, but it began to accept his presence. Sometimes he'd sit outside the pen and read aloud from his journal or simply talk, about the trails he'd ridden, the thunderstorms he'd slept through under the stars, the wife he still spoke to in his dreams. He noticed something else. The horse never neighed, never made a sound. It watched with wide, dark eyes that held stories Elijah would never fully understand. One night, a late spring storm rolled in. Lightning cracked across the prairie, and rain fell in sheets. Elijah rushed to the barn to check on the horse, only to find it standing quietly in the downpour, not moving from its spot, as if awaiting something. He grabbed a heavy blanket, stepped into the pen, and slowly approached. This time, the horse didn't flinch. Instead, it leaned its head forward and pressed its forehead gently against Elijah's chest. Something changed after that. From that moment on, the silent barrier between them dissolved. The swelling in the horse's leg began to subside, and the wound closed into a long scar. Its coat regained a healthy sheen, and its appetite returned. Elijah began walking it around the pasture, never with a rope or reins, just side by side like two old friends on a slow journey. Still, he hadn't named it. He didn't need to. One crisp morning in early summer, Elijah opened the barn door to find the horse waiting outside, looking toward the hills. It pawed the earth once, twice, then turned to him and stood still. "You ready to run again?" Elijah asked softly. The horse didn't move. Elijah reached for a worn leather halter but stopped halfway, lowering his hand. "No. Not a halter. You're not mine to keep." Instead, he walked into the open field, and the horse followed. They stood together at the edge of the prairie, the horizon stretching endlessly ahead. Elijah whispered something that no one else could hear. The horse gave a quiet snort, flicked its ears, and then, for the first time, let out a deep, breathy whinny that echoed into the hills. Then it ran, limping slightly at first, then faster, hooves thundering against the earth, mane catching the light like wildfire. Elijah watched it go, a silent smile tugging at his lips. It didn't look back. But he knew it would return. Days melted into weeks, and the summer sun painted the plains with brilliant gold. Elijah continued his quiet routine, tending the garden, repairing fences, and writing in his journal. But his thoughts often drifted to the horse, the silent friend who had returned to the wild but never truly left his heart. One early morning, as the first light spread soft pink hues across the sky, Elijah stood by the wooden fence of his pasture, sipping coffee and watching the horizon. Suddenly, a familiar shadow appeared on the crest of the hill, thin at first, then growing larger, moving steadily toward the cabin. The horse had come back. It trotted slowly down the slope, its coat gleaming under the rising sun. Though it still carried the scar on its leg, it moved with strength and grace, the wildness in its eyes mingled with a gentle trust reserved only for Elijah. The horse stopped at the fence and lowered its head, nostrils flaring as if smelling the air for the man it had come to know. "Elijah," the old ranger whispered, voice cracking with emotion. "You came back." He stepped closer and placed his hand on the horse's muzzle. The animal leaned into the touch, breath warm against his skin. From that day forward, the horse visited Elijah often. It never stayed overnight but came each morning, standing patiently by the fence, waiting for him to step outside. Elijah began calling it Whisper, not for any sound it made, but for the quiet connection between them that needed no words. Sometimes, Elijah would open the gate, and Whisper would follow him around the pasture. They walked side by side through fields of waving grass, sharing a bond deeper than friendship, an unspoken understanding of survival, trust, and companionship. One afternoon, a severe storm brewed over the plains. Thunder rumbled, and dark clouds swallowed the sunlight. Elijah hurried to secure the barn but paused when he saw Whisper standing under a lone oak tree, unafraid of the brewing tempest. Elijah approached and gently guided Whisper toward shelter. As the rain poured, they huddled together in the barn, the old man's hand resting on the horse's warm neck. "You're a fighter, Whisper," Elijah murmured. "And you remind me that no matter how wild or broken we are, there's always hope." Years passed, and Elijah's steps slowed, but his heart never wavered. Whisper remained his faithful visitor, a living testament to healing and trust. When Elijah's health declined, neighbors would see the horse waiting quietly outside the cabin, standing guard as if sensing the fragility of life within. One chilly autumn evening, as Elijah lay resting, Whisper appeared by the window, nostrils pressed gently against the glass. Elijah reached out a trembling hand, touching the cold pane where the horse's breath fogged the glass. In that final moment, no words were needed. A life of solitude had been softened by a friendship born in hardship and healed by patience. After Elijah passed, Whisper continued to visit the cabin every season, standing silently at the fence as if honoring a promise made long ago. And the prairie carried their story, the tale of a man and a horse who found each other when both were lost, teaching all who knew them that sometimes, the deepest friendships are the quietest ones. We appreciate you watching all the way through. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.